people are trying to build on land out here, and the government, the city council, provincial government, whatever you want to say, saying, well, the land is just not big enough. The small house that you want to build is a little too big. This, that, the other, 16 feet, a little too far to the left. Maybe it may have 3 feet too high, whatever BS that comes out. This is the conversation that's happening. And this happened to a couple right here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And we have them here with us. So excited to have Josh and his wife, Mandy, with us to kind of talk about what's happening, what is going on, and what has happened. What led up to your initial TikTok that got 80,000 views, and as well, what has happened since?
Our landlord is selling our house, and based on the price he's selling the home, it's $850,000. I speculated that our rent is not going to cover the mortgage. So being a father to 2 kids, I am thinking in my head, I need a plan B. And my father owns a piece of land out on Lakeview Road in Lower Sackville. And he said, you can build on this land if need be, to have a plan B. So I started looking into it, and there was kind of 2 options that we could go. We could go with the backyard suite option, or we could try to subdivide the land, and then we would own the land, then we could build on it, essentially. So whichever way we wanted to go. So we started looking at mini homes, and what we found was basically the smallest you can get is between like 1,000 to 1,100 square feet for a 3-bedroom. We're a family of 4. We have a boy and a girl. We need a 3-bedroom house. Mm-hmm. And an 1,184 square feet mini home is really what we picked out. And mind you, the price of this was affordable. It's $240,000.
Particularly not having to buy the land.
Right. That as well, because land is absolutely absurd. So we looked in the backyard suite option, and they only allowed for up to 968 square feet. And in my head, I'm thinking, how does this help families whatsoever? They're talking about a housing crisis. Here's a family that's trying to make roots here and stay here. But they only allow up to 968 square feet. And with such little land on the market, we asked for an exemption. We went to city planners and we sent them an email, and they said, yeah, we'll have a meeting about it. And a couple days later, they said, yeah, no exemptions. And, that was super frustrating. Here they're talking about a housing crisis, and we get a no exemptions. So we look at subdividing the land. And essentially, for that district, you need 40,000 square feet of space. And the reasoning is for city sewer, right? You have to have a septic tank because they don't have city sewer services. If you have city sewer and city water, then you can have a minimum square footage of 10,000 square feet. The lot is currently 26,000 square feet. So if we had city sewer, it would essentially be okay. But what I proposed to council was, I said, why can't we just share a septic system? It's my parents' house. You approved in the bylaws for the backyard suite to share a septic system. So why is this not an option? And, it just gets shot down. There's just no option to build a house, right? It doesn't matter what we do or which way we turned. Everyone was just shooting the idea down. And it's not because it wouldn't work, right? I mean, if you asked an engineer to go out there and look and say, hey, could I attach this mini home to the septic system and put it on that lot? And if they said no, okay, so be it. But the fact that the bylaws are written such that they will say no instead of saying, you know what, let's look at it. Let's see if this can be done and we can build a house. That's an issue. So it's not really based on logic. The specifications don't help families. Clearly, it's basically just built for one person. 968 square feet is not a lot of space. It's just disappointing for them to talk about a housing crisis and have all these rules in place and there's no exceptions. But, on the flip side of talking about no exceptions, you look at developments going on in Halifax right now. You look at the Strawberry Hill development. That got all unanimously voted yes by council. And now you look at Bank Group going out in Prospect. They're likely going to get a yes to change zoning laws or what have you to build, 5,000 new units out there. But if you're the small guy, and you're trying to build, a little mini home for your family, or we're not even trying to build it, we're just trying to put it on the lot, then, you get a no. And this lot is perfect. It's flat, which you need for a mini home, right? It's got a decent square footage. If it had city sewer, it would meet the minimum lot size. But again, we weren't even asking for a new septic system. We were just saying, could we share? And there's no possibility to even look.
Yeah.
They're not willing to hear you out.
Is there any potential for you to, like, I know that we were actually looking at putting a secondary suite on our property, and that was kind of one of the big things was they were like, oh, well, your sewer isn't big enough, your septic system, your septic tank. Is there a possibility that they would even entertain the idea of like upgrading the septic tank to support more users?
I think they were talking about doing that in that neighborhood, actually.
Yeah. I was talking to Lisa Blackburn about it, and Lisa Blackburn said that, I guess in the next budget, what have you, they're bringing city sewer or septic or whatever you want to call it, out to the Fall River area, you know, which is a good thing because it'll allow more density. But in the meantime, you know, we're looking at, you know, potentially sharing, what have you, even if we had to empty it more frequently for a couple of years while they do this, you know, that's a simple solution that can be done. But no, we asked that question and it was immediately, you know, look at the bylaws and no, you can't do it.
Like, it wasn't even a matter of getting a private company out to survey it themselves or anything. Like, we couldn't even get the approval for the surveying. It was like nothing. And they tried to throw everything at us. Like, they tried to tell us that the property was too close to the highway and that DOT would get on us for building, even though we'd be building on the other side of the house from the highway.
Oh yeah, that was another issue too. So because the lot is right beside the highway, DOT claims it as part of a buffer zone, even though the land is technically owned by...
It's grandfathered in from the house, so it's not like they're ever going to tear down his parents' house to build.
So there's just so many regulations to building right now. It's utterly ridiculous. And, you know, again, they claim we're in a housing crisis, but, you know, they have all these laws written up in such a neat little bow that you can't untie it.
Yeah.
And most of these bylaws existed like longer than I've been alive, and any of them that have been amended haven't been amended since before COVID. So they're prehistoric.
For sure. And what I've gathered too from even our conversations and research over the past year and a half about a lot of these issues is it just seems like, we talked about it before the show, where it's very developer friendly. We've been finding that there's been a lot of focus on density, apartments, condos, what have you. And there's not a whole lot of encouragement for a single family home ownership. And that seems like this falls underneath that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. They, you know, essentially we're going to get forced into renting. And we know that part of developing wealth is owning a home. And, you know, we as a family are trying to do that. You know, we don't want to pay rent forever. We want to own a home. And this was an affordable solution to do that. And, you know, I'm not even saying that it had to be done. I just wanted the option of having someone come out and looking at it and saying, hey, is this possible? And if it's possible, let's do it. But the bylaws don't allow that. The bylaws would rather, you know, they would rather use the bylaws to tell you no, rather than have the bylaws set up to tell you, you know what, maybe it's possible. Let's look into it. If it's possible, let's do it. Let's get you a house. Let's get you protected from a rent eviction.
I can't imagine we're the only family even going through this, even if we're the ones getting the most attention right now. Like, there's got to be a whole other group of people just struggling for the same thing that we're fighting for. Even if you talk to some of the people who were doing interviews from the tent city that came up in Sackville, a lot of them are dual income families, like making normal wages at normal jobs with kids. And the solution for the government during that particular instance was to take the children away from their families rather than try to help them provide affordable housing. Like, that seems absurd to me. And all of this land that's government owned is all catered to those people that are going to put up those giant high rises and those giant, you know, complexes, rather than the people that just probably want to buy like a fair share of land. Even the size of your parents' land was nowhere near the size we needed. Like 1184 square feet mini home on 20,000.
You're good. 26,000 square feet.
That one. Woo! 26,000 square feet. We don't need all that space, you know? So, like, I don't see why it's so hard to just auction off government-owned land to people who need it. Like, genuinely need it.
And one of the things that I think I get most frustrated by is that when you see some of these people who are actively fighting against that kind of ideology, they're usually older, well off, well established. They benefited from the system at that point in time, and now they're like, we don't want this to change. And it's like, you're killing the next generation, though.
Yeah, you want to tell me how I can build my house, but then go home to your cushy little subdivision with your 5-figure, 6-figure paycheck and then try to decide what's right for a family in normal middle-class society.
It's almost not fair. I mean, these grandfathered rules of, I mean, we're supposed to have equal rights as a society, but essentially if you are 60 years old and bought before these bylaws came into existence, you have more rights than someone who is young and doesn't own any land.
Even if you bought before COVID, I owned a house before this all started, and putting aside, the story about how I don't have it anymore, buying, owning, and selling property between 2019 and even like 2021, not even the same world.
Fever dream.
Oh my God, not even the same world. It's insane.
It is insane. And I mean, we've looked at potentially buying the land to put the mini home on. But I mean, we kind of are up against the clock in a sense, right? Because he is still selling the home. Mm-hmm. Luckily, the first offer that went through, we had an offer on like the first week, but it fell through. So, we have some time for now, but it's like, at what point, if it sells, are we screwed? And it's like, at what point does council start to care? Clearly, there's already been families out on the street, and they just don't care. They'd rather take the kids away from the families.
Right. So that's what I'm understanding right now is you're facing this issue of this is all depending on time of when the house you're currently renting out will be sold. Yeah. You will then likely be forced out in the street, and you'll have to find different options.
Well, it scares us because the house that we're in, it's a quadplex, and the price that he is selling it for in order to make the mortgage payments on that unit, I know how much me and my neighbors are all spending on rent, and there's no conceivable way that they're going to make a profit. Even with the 5% rent cap you can do per year to raise rents, it's going to take them 3-4 years to even start breaking even. So the solution to most of these buyers is either going to be to rent, evict, and start from scratch, or to move their own families into this place.
Gee.
And that's what we've been seeing with a lot of the viewings. It's either people interested in moving in their families or people who want to clean slate the whole place.
It's also like, I mean, we also had issues with our landlord as well. I mean, he is, yes, a good landlord, but we signed the lease, how long ago? 2 years ago now? And we didn't...
March of 2021.
Yeah, so we're on a month-to-month right now. So that's what makes this even worse. That is, if it sells, we are completely screwed.
We have 3 months max. That's the allotment for, unless we dispute it. If there's an eviction, it's 3 months.
Essentially, yeah.
So we can drag it out, bureaucracy, blah, 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 blah. But like, it's going to buy us a little bit of time, maybe.
Yeah. And so, yeah, as you said, you're up against the clock, and the bylaws are just, not really bending in any way, shape, or form for you. And so where does that leave you now? Obviously, you've put out videos on TikTok. You've gone on CBC or about to go on CBC to tell your story. You're here now. Is this kind of the strategy of just to try and get your voice as loud as possible, put some pressure to make something happen here?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, election is coming up for council, right? It's coming up in the fall. And we need new voices in council, clearly. We need voices who support everyone, not just the little guy. We need a council who is going to realize that the bylaws are not working and we need change. And, I don't know all the answers, but I know for sure that they need to change. So our strategy is kind of just keep putting the message out and kind of get the story out. And, there's obviously other people in the same situation. We're not the only one, and I know that. But if I can get the message out, and maybe our story resonates with someone else and it gets heard, maybe now they feel like they have a voice. Now they speak up. Maybe another person speaks up. And this starts to snowball into where there's actually change that goes into effect.
Shame changes the game. So just shame them and shame them and shame them.
More or less.
Yeah.
But what's funny is that I actually, when I was volunteering on a board that was attached to council, attached to planning and development, one of the things that one of the counselors said to me, he said, if you have a group of 20 people who are loud, well-informed, and well-connected, he's like, you can change anything you want in the city. So it was kind of almost like a hopeful message in that way. So I think that you're doing the right thing here by trying to get your message out, because I really do believe that that's true, that you can get a small group of committed, very vocal citizens together to change something, that it can change.
Well, that's why I appreciate people like you guys who actually have the platform in the local circles that can get these messages even farther, because that's what it actually takes to make the difference. We're just two people, but it takes a village.
We just got a letter from I think it was our who was it?
Paul Russell.
Paul Russell. Yeah. So I messaged him. And I talked to him about our situation. And I think, is he an MLA or is he a counselor? I think he's a counselor for HRM.
I can't remember. He's a hypocrite is what he is.
Yeah, he is. Absolutely, he is. See, he sent us a brochure in the mail saying, talking about homelessness and,
Oh my God.
what is a homeless person and how everything he is doing to help the homelessness crisis. But when I sent him an email, he replied very snarkily and, about the bylaws. And he said, clearly, in large bold letters, the bylaw states, blah, 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 you cannot build. I can't foresee this happening.
It was like sucks to suck.
Right after we got that brochure. It's just the most ironic thing, giving that brochure as you're getting an email from him, basically giving you the middle finger saying, you're not going to build a house here. It sucks to suck.
Yeah. Well, it kind of takes me back to what our guest last week, Dalton, said, is no one in politics can say they care about housing and just keep thinking these bylaws make sense and stand by them the way they have, as if it's the word of God.
Oh my God.
So it's pretty wild.
It's because they can sit in their little fancy subdivisions in their little fishbowl and watch us like Big Brother. And it's almost like a game of, who's getting kicked out next.
If you look at the national level too, they have written into law the National Housing Strategy, which says that housing is a right and that they have to make policy change that is effective and is reasonable to provide housing. So I put this in every email, and we've emailed Tim Houston, John Lohr. We've emailed every councillor pretty well near, all city planners. And not one of them has responded to that part of the email in which I said, if you look at that national law, it is national law that you need to make reasonable policy changes to make sure that housing is provided. Not one of them wrote back about that. Not a single one. So, that just tells me that they do not care whatsoever.
Wanted to be excluded from that narrative.
Well, it's not their department. That's the federal government. So
Right?
I know it's municipal,
Exactly.
but
no, that's not what I mean. I'm saying it's like the equivalent of like going and finding that person in Canadian Tire, and they're like, oh, actually, I don't work in seasonal. You need to.
You have to go to automotive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess my last thing I'll put out is, what is your final parting message? You want to make sure it drives the point home of what you want to see done and the message you want to get across here.
I want a house.
I want them to change the bylaws to make them more reasonable. And I want them to look at the bylaws and I want them to realize that, hey, these are a big issue that is preventing us from normal working-day people having homes.
Right.
Yep.
And not just having homes that are affordable. Like, again, you look at what condos are costing or whatever, $2,500 a month. I could have had this house, this little mini home, for a mortgage of about $1,200. And you think about the change,
Normal.
That's really positive for society to have the price come down that
It
much.
has to be like a case-by-case basis.
But
if it's that hard to write into bylaws specific terms for every single person, make it case by case. Let people apply. Let people tell their stories. Let people show you what they're working with. It's really not that hard. You go to get a mortgage at a bank and they make you tell them their whole life story. Like, you got to sell your soul to get a mortgage.
True.
You got to go through every single nook and cranny of every tax form you've ever filed since the womb. I'm sure that you can have a process by which people can apply for these on a need-to-need basis, and more people can get approved.
Yeah.
And they need exemptions too, clearly.
I agree.
And they need bylaws that allow things to be looked at in a reasonable manner and not just, it doesn't meet this specific requirement. No, can't happen. Look at each situation separately and find out if it's possible. And if it's possible, go ahead, build it. We shouldn't dictate whether you can own a home or not based on some...
Well, especially on land you already own. Like, we're not asking for brand new land here. It's our land. We can put a 10-foot castle on it if we want to, in theory, but apparently not.
Well, not according to council.
No.
That was electric, wasn't it? Well, we enjoyed it. Hope you did too. If you did, you can check this video out here to the top right corner right here in my window. Get over. There it is. There it is right there. And if you liked that, you can also check this one right here. We love you. Have a good one. Peace out.